Welcome back to Fate 40 and Beyond. I'm Jen. I'm your host, and this is the podcast that gets real with midlife. We talk about all the things. Aside from the podcast, I am the owner of Soulful Existence, where I help women in transition, any kind of transition, through one-on-one sessions, tarot, mediumship, or past life regression. I'm also the owner, developer, I never really know what to call myself, creator of the astrology app, The Cosmic Brief. You can check that out, either one of them, down in the show notes. I'll have links for both. The Cosmic Brief helps bridge the gap between what is astrology and how to use it in the day-to-day life. I love it. It's one of my most favorite things. It helps to explain what the daily transits mean for you and how to apply it to your day-to-day energy. It's awesome. I check it every morning. Let's get back to the podcast, which is also about astrology today. And before you go, oh, wait, I don't speak astrology terms. I'm going to help you walk through all of that because I feel like this is a very important transit, especially for those of us in midlife. I just turned 46 and I'm embarking on a new chapter of my own healing journey. And this is going to be a big part of that. So hear me out. Today, we're talking about a major astrological shift or transit called Chiron in Taurus. Taurus was recently, for several years, in Aries. Now, this transit means that it's moving signs. So let's talk a little bit about the basics of what a transit is. So when astrologers talk about a transit, we're talking about what's happening in the sky right now. A birth chart is like a picture, a snapshot of the sky at the exact moment you were born. Those placements never change. A transit is the current movement of those planets through the different zodiac signs in the sky. So when someone says it's Gemini season, that means that the sun is currently in the portion of the sky that contains the Gemini constellation. Just today, the sun moved from Gemini into Cancer. So happy summer solstice. But also, aside from the sun, aside from the moon changes signs every couple of days. Those are also transit. We have asteroids like Chiron. In mythology, Chiron was known as the wounded healer. He was a centaur, but unlike other centaurs who were often wild and chaotic, Chiron was wise, skilled, and deeply respected. He was a teacher, a mentor, and he taught heroes. He understood medicine, music, prophecy, and healing, but Chiron also carried a wound that he could not fully heal. And this is where the astrological meaning ties in. In astrology, Chiron represents a tender place, a wound, the vulnerability, the part of us that feels more exposed, inadequate, maybe even shameful, or difficult to fully resolve and heal. Chiron is not only the wound, and that's the important part to think about when we talk about Chiron. Chiron is also the wisdom that comes from the wound. It's the place where, through our own pain, we develop compassion, skill, insight, understanding, and then most importantly, for me, I think, the ability to help others with that wound. Chiron's not where we're broken, but it's where we've been initiated of sorts. And it's not glamorous. Chiron is like the wound that we just cannot seem to heal on our own. It means that something in our life has been touched in a tender way. And because of that, you've had to learn, you've had to adapt, and you've had to become conscious about it. Sometimes Chiron shows up in that thing that we're overcompensating for in life. Sometimes it's the area where we feel like everyone else got the how-to book and we didn't. Sometimes it's the place where we can be incredibly wise for others, but still tender when it comes to ourselves. You might be able to help everyone else with this confidence or thing that you struggle with, but really never quite feel like you can embrace it yourself. You might be the person that everyone comes to for advice about money, parenting, healing, or purpose, while still privately feeling like you're trying to figure it out. That's Chiron. And it's not always loud and in your face. Sometimes it's quiet. Sometimes it's an old story underneath a current situation. It's not just, I'm upset because this person rejected me. It's this rejection touched the part of me that I already believed wasn't good enough. It's not, I'm stressed about money. It's money touches the part of me that doesn't feel safe. So this is why Chiron's work is so deep. It asks us to look underneath the obvious problem and find the older, deeper wound. Now, what does that mean about it moving into Taurus? Let's talk about that. Taurus is an earth sign. Taurus is connected to the body, the senses, the physical world, money, values, resources, stability, comfort, pleasure, food, beauty, nature, and whatever makes us feel safe. It's not an abstract sign. Taurus is all about being embodied. It asks, can I feel safe in my body? Can I enjoy my life? Can I receive? Can I build something stable? Can I trust what I value? Can I slow down long enough to actually feel what's real? Taurus also has a deep connection to self-worth. Do you see where we're going with this? This is where Chiron entering Taurus is becoming such a big deal. Because when Chiron moves into Taurus, the collective wound shifts towards Taurus themes. We might begin to see wounds around money, scarcity, financial safety, bodily autonomy, aging, beauty standards, food, sensuality, pleasure, material security, the environment, ownership, labor, and the way that we define our value. On a personal level, this can bring up questions like, do I believe I deserve to feel safe? Do I believe that I deserve pleasure, support, money? Do I have value even when I'm not productive? Do I trust my body? Do I listen to my body? Do I know what I actually value, or have I been living according to everyone else's values? And I think that last question is especially important as we get into midlife, because midlife has this way of stripping away borrowed values. The first half of life, many of us are just trying to build. We're trying to survive, to succeed, to create stability, to raise our kids, establish ourselves, to figure out how to make relationships work. We're trying to be responsible, to be accepted, and to be considered good and capable. And then somewhere along the line, usually in our 40s and 50s, we start thinking, wait a second, did I actually want all this? Or is just what I thought a successful life was supposed to look like? Did I choose it because it fits me, or did I choose it because I was trying to feel worthy? And that's where Chiron and Taurus can be a little confronting, because Taurus doesn't only ask what you have, it asks whether what you have is actually aligned with what you value. I think for women in midlife, this transit can be especially powerful because so many of us have been conditioned to outsource our worth. I know I have. We base our worth on appearance, relationships, motherhood, productivity, desirability, emotional labor. How low maintenance can we be? How needed are we? Am I good enough? Am I agreeable enough? Am I successful enough? But not too successful, because we don't want to intimidate anyone. Am I aging well, but also looking like I'm not trying too hard? Am I spiritual, but wait, am I also weird? I can be strong, but not that strong. And I can be independent, right? But I still have to be available to everyone. And it's exhausting. Ask me how I know. Chiron and Taurus might just bring us face to face with all of the ways that we have tried to earn safety through performance, because that's what it really is. A lot of what we call that perfectionism, overworking, people-pleasing, self-abandonment is actually an attempt to feel safe. If I do everything right, I'll be safe. If I keep everyone happy, I'll be safe. If I look a certain way, if I make enough money, if I never need too much, if I stay useful, I'll be safe. But the problem is, when safety depends on our performance, we never get to rest. There's always something else to prove, always something else to fix, another thing to earn, another reason that we haven't quite gotten to where we want to be. And Chiron and Taurus is asking us to heal all of that. Now, here's the nice part. It's not overnight. It's not perfectly. We don't have to do this according to anyone else's requirements, but we do have to do it honestly. There's also a connection to the Chiron return. I would almost bet that a big portion of people listening to this podcast in their 40s and 50s have Chiron in Taurus in their natal chart. When a planet comes back to the same sign that it was in when you were born, it's called a return. Around 50 years old, we start to experience our Chiron return. And mine just started. And yours probably did too. And I think that's one of the reasons why this topic matters so much for this audience. So stay tuned. Let's talk about this. And I want to be careful because, yes, while many of us might be experiencing our Chiron return, it doesn't mean that it's happening exactly at this moment. So like with Chiron only being 2 days into Taurus, it's only at like 4 degrees. It still has a ways to go. So the degree of your natal Chiron matters too. It's kind of like the pregame, the main event, and then the after party. It's not meant to tear us apart and put us back together. It's more of like a healing checkpoint. It brings us back to the original wound pattern and asks, are we ready to do this differently? Are you ready to do it your way? Are you ready to stop living around this pain? Stop letting an old story decide what you're allowed to receive? Because I know I do. And I think this is why a lot of people experience major reflection around the age 50. Not midlife crisis. It's just asking us to move on from an old wound that doesn't serve us anymore. It's asking us to stop pretending, stop proving, stop performing, and stop betraying ourselves for safety. Because I can't keep measuring my worth by things that were never meant to define me. So if your Chiron return is happening in Taurus, or if this Chiron in Taurus is activating an important part of your chart, the healing is going to be deeply connected to worth, safety, resources, the body, and values. I don't think it's coincidence that just in the last 6 months, I've really started taking my own physical health to a more serious consideration. Taurus, all about the body. So I want to talk about how to find out where this is happening for you, because we're about to go into what does it mean for each of the individual houses. The houses are specific life areas that the planets activate, light up. And so we want to talk about how to find this out for yourself. First of all, you could download my app. It has it on there. It tells you what sign your Chiron is in. Again, I'm going to put that down below. But the most accurate way, there are a lot of free charts available online. Astro.com is my favorite. That one has always been accurate for me. And you do need your birth time. If you don't have that, just listen to all of the houses and see which one makes the most sense for you right now. But the houses depend on your birth time and the location of your birth. So if you don't know exactly what it is, you can still gain some information from this, but it's going to be more specific if you have your birth time. Once you have your chart, you want to find Taurus. They're at the wheel. There's a little triangle for each sign. Find the one for Taurus and find out what house that occupies. The house shows where Chiron and Taurus will be lighting up and activating in your chart for the next several years. Right, let's go house by house. Because as we do this, I want you to remember it's not about fear-mongering. It's not about predicting anything. It's about awareness. The house that this is in will tell us where the most healing work might be the most useful. That's all it is. Not because there's something wrong, but because there's something just ready to shift perspective. First house. The first house is connected to identity, self-image, embodiment, how you show up in the world. This is the house of self. It's your presence, your body, your personality. I always tell people first house is like the way that you first meet people, your first interaction with someone. That's their first house. It's the way that you initiate movement through life. Chiron and Taurus in your first house. You might be healing wounds around being seen, taking up space, trusting your body, or feeling worthy exactly as you are. This can be a powerful transit for women in midlife because body often becomes a major conversation in this season of life. Our bodies change. a lot right now. Our faces change, our energy changes, our hormones change, and the way that the world responds to us might change. We're not 20-year-olds anymore. And if it feels like you've built your sense of worth around being attractive, youthful, desirable, visually acceptable, because people are biased like that, this transit can bring up a lot of deep tenderness for you. And the healing is not about trying to become a version of yourself that gets approval. The healing is about coming home to yourself. It's kind of like not caring what other people think anymore. This transit in your first house is asking, can I value myself in this body at this age in this season? Can I stop apologizing for existing? Can I let myself be seen without performing? Can I trust the person I'm becoming? A practical way to work with this would be through embodiment practices, gentle movement, mirror work, if that feels supportive, talking to yourself in the mirror, dressing in ways that feel like you now, not who you used to be, reclaiming your appearance as self-expression rather than self-judgment. The wound might say, I'm only worthy if I look a certain way. The healing says, my body is not an apology. Second house. This is one of the most direct placements because the second house is naturally connected to Taurus themes. This is the house that rules money, income, possessions, resources, self-worth, values, and what we believe we deserve. With Chiron here, there might be healing around scarcity, earning, receiving, financial fear, the belief that your worth depends on what you have. And this can bring up money stories very clearly for you. Maybe you grew up with financial instability, or it was used to control you. Maybe you learned that wanting more, money, resources, whatever, made you selfish. Or maybe you learned that there was never enough. And maybe you became the overly responsible one because no one else could be trusted. This one would hit really hard with people who have achieved that stability, but your nervous system still lives like everything could disappear tomorrow. Some of the questions that someone with Chiron in the second house might ask, do I feel worthy of having needs? Do I believe I deserve to be paid well? Can I receive without guilt? Do I know what I truly value? Am I spending, saving, earning, or sacrificing from fear? For women in midlife, this can be huge, especially because if you've spent years prioritizing everyone else's needs over your own, and that healing may involve getting honest about money, but not from shame, from care. It's the perfect time to look at your finances. If you own a business, look at your pricing. Look at your relationships with receiving, not earning, receiving. And look at whether you undercharge, overgive, or feel guilty for wanting that stability. The wound may say, I have to prove my value, but healing says my worth is not a negotiation. Third house. The third house is all about voice, communication, thoughts, learning, siblings, early environment, and the way that you name your reality. This is the house of everyday communication, the way you speak, the way you think, the way that you process information. With Chiron and Taurus here, you might be you might be healing wounds around being heard, believed, understood, or even being allowed to have your own perspective. Maybe you were dismissed when you spoke up. Maybe you were told you're too sensitive, too dramatic, too opinionated, or not smart enough. Maybe you learned to keep things to yourself because speaking up created conflict. Or maybe you've used your voice for everyone else, but hesitate when it comes to your own truth. In midlife, this can become very obvious because many women reach a point where silence becomes unbearable. It just does. We don't care what the fallout is at some point, especially if we try to keep it in. You may realize that you have spent decades softening your truth for other people so they could stay comfortable. Or you might notice how often you say, it's fine, when it's absolutely not fine. You might realize your nervous system still expects punishment when you're being honest. The questions you might ask if you have this placement is, do I trust my own voice? Do I believe my thoughts matter? Where am I still editing myself to be acceptable? What truth have I been avoiding to say out loud? Practical healing here might include writing, speaking, podcasting. If you want to be a guest, let me know. Therapy, difficult conversations, or simply practicing saying what you've been meaning to without over-explaining yourself. The wound might say, my voice causes problems, but the healing says, my truth has value. Now on to the fourth house. The fourth house is connected with home, family, ancestry, emotional safety, roots, childhood, and the private self. This is the lowest point of the chart. And so it is the very basement level root work of who we are. This is the deep, deep work. And I would imagine this is going to be very tender for some people as they work through the Chiron and Taurus in their fourth house. It's the emotional foundation of who we are. It's a family system, the home environment, the messages we absorbed before we had language for them. The Chiron and Taurus wound here might be connected to whether you felt safe, valued, protected, or emotionally nourished growing up. It could be that home was unstable, love felt conditional. Maybe money stress shaped the emotional atmosphere. Maybe you learned that your needs were inconvenient. Maybe you became hyper independent because depending on others didn't feel safe. For midlife women, this can also connect to creating a home that finally feels like yours. Not just physically, but emotionally. These wounds might ask, what does my safety mean to me now? What family stories about worth am I still carrying? What did I learn about money, comfort, food, rest, and receiving? And am I allowed to create peace even if I didn't grow up with it? This can also be a transit where ancestral patterns become more visible. You might start seeing how scarcity, self-denial, body shame, or survival mode was passed down through generations. And the healing's not about blaming your family forever, but it's about deciding what does not need to continue on through you. This wound says, I'm not safe unless I control everything, but the healing says, I can build safety within myself and around myself. And to be honest, this is where mine is, in the fourth house. So it's going to be fun. Moving on to the fifth house. The fifth house is all about joy and creativity, romance, pleasure, play, visibility, and self-expression. This one can sound lighter, but it can also be surprisingly tender. And that's okay. Because many people have deep wounds around joy. Maybe creativity was criticized. Maybe play was treated as irresponsible. Maybe pleasure came with guilt. Or maybe you just learned that your role was to be useful and not joyful. And very possibly you stopped creating because you were afraid that it wouldn't be good enough. For women in midlife, the fifth house can be beautiful, but also a very confronting place because this is what it asks of us. When did I stop doing things just because they delight me? When did I decide everything had to be productive? When did I abandon my creative self? Can I let myself be seen in my joy? This one hits kind of close to home too. This house also connects with romance and desire. So there might also be healing around feeling desirable, playful, alive, and creatively awake. It's not about chasing youth. It's about reclaiming that aliveness. Practical ways to work with this include making art badly on purpose, dancing, singing, dating yourself, dressing for joy. Have you ever heard of dopamine dressing? That's awesome. Like you just are supposed to wear what makes you happy. Take creative risks or allow hobbies to just be hobbies. It doesn't have to be productive. It doesn't have to become a business. I am so guilty of that. This wound says joy has to be earned. But the healing says pleasure is part of being alive. It's time to find that again. Sixth house. The healing here is connected to work, health, routines, service, daily responsibilities, and the relationship between your body and productivity. And I feel like this is a really big one for women who have spent their entire lives being useful. The sixth house is where we manage life. It's the daily grind, the chores, the tasks, the work, the habits, the health routines, and the service we provide to others. With Chiron and Taurus here, you might be healing the belief that your value comes from what you do. And this can show up as burnout, overfunctioning, difficulty resting, maybe chronic stress, body symptoms that force you to slow down, or even a resentment around being needed. Or just maybe The uncomfortable realization that you don't know who you are when you're not taking care of something. The healing here asks, do I feel guilty when I rest? Do I use busyness to avoid myself? Do I listen to my body before it gets loud? Is my daily life built around care or punishment? Do I believe I'm valuable even when I accomplish nothing? And for women in midlife, the body often starts refusing those old patterns. You might not be able to push through like you used to. You might need more recovery, more nourishment, more boundaries, more consistency, taking care of yourself. The healing here is practical, which is nice, better routines, more supportive habits, less self-punishment, and more respect for your body. Because the wound says, I'm only worthy when I'm useful. But the healing says, my body deserves care, not just maintenance. You're not a car. Take care of yourself. Moving into the 7th house. I almost lost track for a second. This one's going to be an interesting one for you guys. If you have Chiron in Taurus in the 7th house, the healing is connected to relationships. That's partnerships, marriage, commitment, and the mirror to other people. This house often brings up the ways that we negotiate our worth through relationships. Fun times. With Chiron and Taurus here, you might be healing patterns around choosing partners, friends, or even clients who reflect old wounds instead of your actual value. Maybe you overgive to be chosen. Maybe you settle for less because asking more feels risky. You avoid commitment because vulnerability feels unsafe. Maybe you lose yourself in those relationships. Or maybe you've confused being needed with being loved. In midlife, relationships often come under review anyways. Not because they're meant to end, but sometimes because the old contract that you have with someone no longer works. The version of you who tolerated certain dynamics just might not exist anymore. Some of the questions that this wound asks us: do my relationships reflect my worth? Where do I abandon myself to keep peace? Can I receive love without earning it? Do I choose from fear or from self-respect? This one's hard. What am I teaching others about how to value me? Practical healing here might involve boundaries, honest conversations, couples work, so working together to find what's now the new normal, leaving unhealthy dynamics, and learning how to stay present in a healthy love without sabotaging it. This wound might say, I have become what others want in order to be loved. But the healing says, I can be connected without abandoning myself. All right, here we go. 8th house. That's all connected to intimacy, trust, shared resources, grief, power, vulnerability, sexuality, debt, inheritance, and deep transformation. This is going to be one of the more intense houses because it deals with things that we cannot fully control. The 8th house asks us to face the places where we merge with others, emotionally, financially, energetically, and intimately. With Chiron and Taurus here, wounds might surface around trusting others, receiving support, financial entanglements, possibly some betrayal, most definitely intimacy, body shame, or the fear of dependence. You may have learned not to need anyone. You might have learned that vulnerability has felt dangerous. Shared money has been complicated. Maybe intimacy brings up old fears of being controlled, exposed, or abandoned. This house asks, can I trust without losing myself? Can I receive support without feeling powerless? Am I still carrying what is ready to be released? Where has shaped my relationship with intimacy? And what does true safety feel like in a deep connection? This is also connected to grief and transformation. The 8th house often asks us to let go of old versions of ourselves, maybe not physically, but psychologically. The identity that survived may not be the identity that can thrive moving forward. Practical healing here can include therapy, trauma work, financial healing, intimacy work, definitely shadow work, grief rituals, and learning how to be supported. The wound might say, if I let go, I will not survive. The healing says, transformation can be safe. Moving into the 9th house. The 9th house is connected to beliefs, faith, meaning, higher learning, spirituality, travel, teaching, publishing, and worldview. This house asks what you believe and whether those beliefs are truly yours. With Chiron and Taurus here, you might be healing wounds around trusting your wisdom, claiming your beliefs, feeling worthy of teaching what you know. Maybe you were shamed for your spirituality, or you were told that your beliefs were wrong. I mean, maybe you even inherited religious, cultural, or philosophical ideas that made your body, pleasure, money, or desire feel unsafe. And most likely you have wisdom, but you hesitate to share it because you don't feel qualified enough. Of course, this can be relevant in midlife because many women experience a spiritual reorientation. The beliefs that once held everything together might not fit anymore, and that can be disorienting. This house might ask, what do I actually believe now? What truths have I outgrown? Where have I outsourced my authority? Am I allowed to trust my lived experience as wisdom? And what meaning am I making from my life? Some of the more practical healing, some of my favorite: studying, teaching, writing, travel, spiritual exploration, and releasing belief systems rooted in shame. The wound might say, I need permission to trust what I know. And the healing says, my lived experience is wisdom. And it is. Getting close to the end, we have the 10th house. This is all about career, visibility, reputation, ambition, leadership, public identity, and legacy. This house can be very confronting because it asks who you are in the world. With Chiron and Taurus here, you might be healing wounds around success, recognition, failure, authority, status, or only feeling valuable when you're actually achieving. Maybe you've chased success to prove your worth. Maybe you've avoided visibility because being seen feels unsafe. Or you've outgrown a career that once gave you identity. And maybe you're realizing that the title, the role, the reputation no longer fits. For many women in midlife, this can be a huge turning point. It might ask, is this what I want to be known for? Do I still want the life I worked so hard to build? Am I successful by my own definition or someone else's? Who am I without my title? And what legacy actually matters to me? And a transit through this house can bring career changes, leadership opportunities, visibility fears, or maybe just the desire to build something more aligned. The healing's not about rejecting the ambition, but it's about separating the ambition from your worth. You can want success without using success to prove your value. The wound says, I am what I achieve. The healing says, my work can express my value, but it does not create it. 2 more houses. The 11th house is connected to friendship, community, belonging, networks, social media, collective spaces, dreams, and future vision. This house asks where you belong, whether you believe there's room for you. With Chiron and Taurus here, wounds might surface around exclusion, comparison, rejection, visibility in groups, or feeling like you have to earn your place. Maybe you've always felt slightly outside the circle, or friendships have been complicated. Possibly community has felt unsafe, or maybe social media activates that comparison or scarcity. Maybe you have big dreams, but part of you doesn't believe that you're allowed to claim them. This house asks us, do I feel worthy of belonging? Do I shrink to fit into groups? Are my communities aligned with my values? And what future am I afraid to claim? This one I think is important. Can I be supported by people who truly see me? And of course, in midlife, for women in general, community becomes especially important during this time. The relationships that worked in one season might not work in another. You might need people who understand what you're becoming and not just people who are attached to what you used to be. And that's okay. Because a healing aligned with this transit through the 11th house is all about communities, releasing performative friendships, sharing your work, allowing support, and building spaces where others feel like they can belong to. This wound says, there is no place for me. And the healing says, I do not have to earn belonging by becoming less of myself. Here we go. The last house, the 12th house, and the healing here is connected to the subconscious, solitude, spirituality, hidden fears, ancestral patterns, dreams, endings, surrender, and all of the unseen. This one is subtle but profound. The 12th house is not always obvious at first. It works under the surface. This is the house of the subconscious. Chiron and Taurus here. You might be healing old scarcity patterns, hidden shame, body disconnection, inherited survival fears, or unconscious beliefs about worth and safety. And you might not immediately know when something or why something feels tender, but you might just notice that old grief, maybe fatigues, dreams coming up, memories, emotions. This house asks, what hidden belief is shaping my choices? What am I carrying that might not have started with me? Where do I need solitude and spiritual healing? Can I surrender what I no longer control? Can I offer compassion to the parts of me that I have kept hidden? And for women in midlife, the 12th house, having Chiron and Taurus there, can feel like a quiet unraveling. Not everything is meant to be forced into clarity immediately. Some healing happens in prayers, rest, dream, meditation, therapy, journaling, and even silence. Practical healing here might include spiritual practice, nervous system care, dream work. And by dream work, I mean like journaling your dreams. What does it mean to you? Solitude, compassionate self-inquiry, and releasing the need to explain every feeling right away. This wound might want you to believe, I am alone with this. But the healing says, even the hidden parts of me deserve compassion. So now that we've gone through the houses, let's talk about how to actually use this transit, because astrology is only helpful if we do something meaningful with it. Chiron and Taurus is not asking us to obsess over our wounds. It's not asking us to identify as broken. It's not asking us to spend the next several years blaming ourselves, blaming our childhoods, blaming our exes, our bodies, our bank accounts, whatever. But it's asking us to become more conscious. So one of the first ways to work with this transit is to notice your worth patterns. Like, where do you feel like you have to prove yourself? Where do you overgive? Where do you undercharge? Where do you apologize for having needs? Deny yourself pleasure? Do you stay in scarcity even when support is available? Do you treat your body like a project instead of a partner? Just ask yourself stuff. The second way is to examine your relationship with safety. Because Taurus wants that stability, but sometimes we confuse stability with control. Real safety is not controlling every outcome. Real safety is knowing that you can stay connected to yourself even when life changes. And I think that's an incredible midlife lesson, because life does change. Bodies change, families change, careers change, relationships change, and even desires can change. If our entire sense of safety depends on nothing changing, then we will always feel threatened. Chiron and Taurus teaches us how to create more grounded internal safety. The third way is to reconnect with your body, not as punishment, not as a project, not as something to fix, but as our home. Eat in a way that nourishes you, move in a way that supports you, rest before your body has to force you. Notice where you hold that tension. Notice what pleasure feels like. This is your permission slip to go notice what pleasure feels like. Notice what your body has been trying to tell you. The fourth way to work with this transit is to clarify your values. A lot of midlife discomfort comes from realizing we were living by the values we inherited, not the values we chose. So I urge you to ask yourself, what matters to you now? What kind of life actually feels good? What am I no longer willing to sacrifice? What do I want my energy, time, money, and attention to support? And this fifth way to work with this transit is going to be a little hard for some of us. Practice receiving. Receiving sounds simple in theory until you try to do it, and it's been ingrained to not do it well. Receive a compliment without deflecting. Receive help without guilt. Receive money without immediately feeling like you have to owe more back. Receive rest without proving that you earned it. And receive love without trying to become easier to love. For many women, receiving is a wound because we've been trained to give. But Chiron and Taurus asks us to heal that imbalance. Finally, stop trying to earn your worth. That doesn't mean to stop growing. It does not mean to stop working. It doesn't mean to stop having goals. It just means to stop using growth, work, and goals as evidence that you deserve to exist. You can pursue beautiful things from wholeness. You do not have to pursue them from lack. So as we move through the next several years of Chiron and Taurus, I think many of us are going to be asked to redefine enough. Enough money, enough success, beauty, productivity, healing, enough proof. And maybe the answer is not more. Maybe the answer is a different relationship with ourselves. Maybe Chiron and Taurus is not here to help us become more valuable. Maybe it's here to help us to stop acting like we aren't. Maybe the wound was never that we lacked worth. The wound was believing that we did. And maybe the healing is finally letting that belief loosen its grip. For the women in midlife, like me, this feels like sacred work because we're at a point in life where we can no longer afford to live only for approval. We cannot keep postponing joy. We cannot keep abandoning our bodies. We cannot keep making ourselves smaller to keep other people comfortable. We can't keep measuring our own value by our usefulness. The second half of life deserves more honesty than that. It deserves more softness, more truth, more pleasure, self-respect, alignment, more life that actually feels like ours. So as Chiron begins this journey through Taurus, I want to leave you with a few questions. Where have I been trying to earn my worth? What could I change if I believed I was already valuable? What does safety feel like in my body? And what do I actually value now? What am I ready to stop proving? And what part of me is finally ready to be treated as worthy? Not someday, not after one more accomplishment, not after I lose weight, make more money, or heal every wound, but now, because you don't have to become worthy, you already are. Thank you so much for spending this time with me today. Again, you can find me on soulfulexistence.com, or you can check out the Cosmic Brief down in the show notes if you want a personalized astrology app that helps you understand how these transits are moving through your own chart. If this episode resonated with you, share it with another woman in midlife who might be questioning her worth, her direction, her identity, or whatever comes next. Until next time, maybe be a little bit more gentle with yourself. Make sure you subscribe, comment below. I can't wait to see you again. Bye.